Mr. Hauser, you also said that you believe that Secretary Mayorkas was a stalwart advocate for the men and women of our immigration and enforcement agency. Does a stalwart advocate...
When he was the director of USCIS, I worked directly with Alejandro Mayorkas, and he was one of the most unpleasant, backstabbing human beings that I've ever had the misfortune to meet.
Welcome to No Border, No Country, joined by Judge Matt O'Brien. This is a Congressman Pat Fallon from Texas, and he's questioning another panelist on the witness table there. This is Jason Hauser, and he worked with ICE. What was his position, do you recall?
He was the chief of staff at ICE, and he's an interesting part of the government phenomena here inside the Beltway. To my knowledge, he's had no experience whatsoever in anything connected with immigration. It came up during the hearings if he'd ever been a law enforcement officer. He said no, he doesn't have any background in immigration. He was a military officer. And chief of staff positions here in the D.C. area are kind of like they're an administrator who's responsible for keeping the front office staff at an agency going. And so they'll deal with everything from labor and employment to logistics to paperwork requirements. It's kind of a catch-all job. There seems to be a very high proportion of these people who come from the military with some kind of an administrative or logistical background in the military. And my hat's off to all of the veterans. My wife is an Army veteran. I'm very proud of her. I don't mean to be undermining veterans, but the fact that you've been in combat or have a military skill doesn't mean that you necessarily know anything about immigration law or border control. And that was clearly the case here.
So this is Congressman Fallon questioning Hauser, and he's asking him about Alejandro Mayorkas, whose performance has been well dissected on this program.
Yeah, I think Fallon's a big fan of good old Uncle Ali.
Yeah, so let's have a look here at this exchange.
Last year, 53,000, an increase of 2,650%. If just 1% of them are sleeper agents, because most of them are military-age men, I shudder to think what will happen in a free and open society if they invade Taiwan and those agents are activated. 170 countries represented by illegal crossers. Cost probably $155 billion. Opioid deaths have doubled. And our national security is at risk because we don't know who these people are. And Mr. Hauser, you also said that you believe that Secretary Mayorkas was a stalwart advocate for the men and women of our immigration and enforcement agencies.
Every day.
Stalwart advocate.
Every day.
Does a stalwart advocate lie about, do the stalwart advocate lie about what happened? Were any Haitian migrants whipped by Border Patrol agents? No, they were not. But you know what? It's interesting because he got an email saying just that. You know what he said? Our nation saw horrifying images that do not reflect who we are. We know those images painfully conjured up the worst elements of our nation's ongoing battle against systemic racism. I didn't know that controlling a horse with reins had anything to do with systemic racism. And then he said, to see people treated like that, they did. Horses barely running over people, being strapped, it's outrageous. Was anybody strapped?
Sir, I'd have to direct you to the CBP.
No one was strapped, Mr. Hauser. Chief Raul Ortiz, too. Everyone that was there said that didn't happen. And that lion SOB said it anyway, and he threw his Border Patrol agents under the bus. I don't think that fits my definition of stalwart advocate. The guy's a bum, and I'm glad he got impeached. And he got impeached because he richly deserved that. So you're a compassionate man.
Stalwart advocate, Matt. Care to weigh in on that one?
When he was the director of USCIS, I worked directly with Alejandro Mayorkas. He insisted that everyone call him Ali, like he was everyone's buddy. And he was one of the most unpleasant, backstabbing human beings that I've ever had the misfortune to meet. So, stalwart advocate, I don't know where Hauser's coming from. He must have been the one that offered Hauser the job. Therefore, in Hauser's mind, he's a stalwart advocate. I would tend to agree with the Lion SOB characterization that Mr. Fallon engaged in.
Apparently, this is the kind of guy who's a ladder climber in Washington in this administration, because when you can see something so clearly and see the evidence that the photographer of those pictures that he referred to said that is not what happened, and then for him to be called on and just have deer in the headlights and can't answer what's plain obvious to everyone, isn't that amazing that these are the people that move up in the world in this town?
Yeah, it's astounding. But, Mayorkas is also a perfect example of that. I mean, I was not a Border Patrol agent. I didn't ride a horse when I worked for the government. But I know that those Border Patrol horses are trained police horses. The agents that are riding those horses can tap the horse on the haunches, and the horse will gently put its foot down on top of a person's foot to hold them in place. And what they were doing that the press tried to turn into strapping people was one of the ways that they control those horses is by twirling the reins. So that while they're in motion, the horse knows how to fluidly go in one direction or another, which is what they were doing. But Ali Mayorkas, instead of defending the people that worked with him, saw an opportunity to advance critical race theory and turn this into some kind of an incident where the Haitians were being attacked because they're black, completely forgetting that this was a group of Haitians about to riot when they had been told that they could not cross over the border and had to remain under a bridge on the U.S. side of the border. But weren't going to be permitted to enter the U.S. until they were properly processed. And the Border Patrol did exactly what it was supposed to do. It defended the border. Meanwhile, the guy who's the head of the agency that's charged with defending the border is trying to undermine the people who worked for him and who were doing exactly the job that the taxpayers have paid them to do. And I would respectfully say that, I don't know whether Hauser was good, bad, or indifferent military officer. The way he was talking during the hearing, he must have had some experience, was fairly high ranking. He probably should have stuck to that and left immigration to the experts.